Hello, welcome to course development through the Universal Design for Learning framework. Thank you for coming to our presentation for the ASU Accessibility Awareness Day Conference 2024. My name is Alyssa Nostas, and I'm from ASU's Global Launch, and I'm here with my colleague, Caitlin Decker, who is also from ASU Global Launch. So today, in this presentation, we'd like to discuss with you some challenges that we have faced and perhaps you face as well in developing engaging and inclusive courses. We'll then review together the Universal Design for Learning, or the UDL framework, and then we'll demonstrate some applications of this framework in courses that we have developed. So to begin, let's talk about some of the challenges you have faced, or we have faced as well, when developing engaging and inclusive courses. So one, of course, is meeting diverse student needs. We have a variety of students that come from all different backgrounds. They have different learning styles. So to be able to appeal and to meet those diverse needs and learning styles can be quite challenging. It also can be challenging to ensure that the learning objects that we're creating, for example, the videos, the readings, the quizzes, or our assignments, actually do help students to achieve the learning objectives. Students also come sometimes with lower motivation. So how do you engage students, especially with anything that's online? So that's a challenge that we all face, I believe. And then, of course, developing students' academic and technology skills can be challenging, as well as managing any attrition in our courses. So now that we've looked at the challenges, let's look at a possible solution, or what we did to help to try to solve some of these challenges. So we actually started using the Universal Design for Learning, or the UDL framework. And this is a framework through which educators design instruction that allows students a variety of ways to access content, engage with instruction, and demonstrate their learning. So we've used this framework to help us to develop inclusive, accessible, and engaging courses for our students. So let's look a little bit more in depth at the UDL framework. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate right now. She'll explain a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Alyssa. So the Universal Design for Learning framework is organized around three main principles, and those are to design multiple means of engagement, design multiple means of representation, and design multiple means of action and expression. And we have this from Vanderbilt University that by applying these three principles, educators can design flexible instructional experiences that incorporate options for learners. And the CAST's UDL guidelines are a set of guidelines that help us to apply the principles. So that's what we're going to look at today, is these guidelines in detail and some examples that demonstrate applying these guidelines. So looking at our first principle of to design multiple means of engagement, breaking that down a little bit further, this means to design options for welcoming interest and identities, sustaining effort and persistence, and options for emotional capacity, or building that emotional capacity. And again, we'll look at all of these with some in-depth examples, some detailed examples, but a quick example here is that you might give students opportunities to choose topics for assignments as a way to welcome interest in your course. And then moving on to the second principle of design multiple means of representation. Here we want to design options for perception, language and symbols, and building knowledge. Another quick example in this area is to create a glossary for important terms and difficult vocabulary. And lastly, our third principle of designing multiple means of action and expression. Here we want to design options for interaction, for expression and communication, and for strategy development. And a quick example in this area is to ask students to express their ideas through multimedia in course tasks. It's different options for expression and communication there. And now we actually want to look at the guidelines where they live in the from the CAST website. So CAST has developed this set of UDL guidelines that are aligned with each of these principles. Here we have three links that all go to the same place. So however you're watching our presentation today, if you are able to enter that address into your web browser, or if you have your phone handy, you can scan this QR code. But they all will take you to the CAST site with the UDL guidelines. So it will go there and just walk you through things a little bit. So if you follow any of those links, you will find the guidelines here. And if you scroll down, you will see that again, they're organized around these three principles: design multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression. And then these three bands across of access, support, and executive function. And so together, this creates the 9 dimensions of learner variability. Uh, we would like to encourage you to maybe pause here or after our session to really spend some time exploring the guidelines here. There is a lot of information and a lot of very useful descriptions and examples. So if you go to any of these areas, you'll find even more information describing the idea of designing options for interaction, for example. Um, and there are often further examples and checkpoints or things that you can think about whether you're applying them in your own context. So again, we really would encourage you to spend a bit more time clicking around in each of these areas and the sub areas of the dimensions to learn about ways that you can apply UDL in your context. Um, and then with that, we wanted again to go into some more of our own course development to show you how we've been applying UDL. So our first example here is in the area of engagement and welcoming interest. So we apply this principle by using a module framework in our courses. And we've defined a module framework as a plan for a typical module in a course. Or in other words, this framework has repeated learning objects that are repeated across the modules in our course. And I think I can explain that best by jumping to the example and showing you here. Excuse me. In this course, it's just jump to the fifth module. And from the module's view, you can see each of the items that we have. I won't go and open each of them, but very briefly, it begins with an overview or introduction to the module. Then there's a topic preview discussion, followed by an instructional video, a quiz to check for comprehension, goes on to a video, a reading that happens to be broken down into a few parts, and so on. And then throughout the module, there are different tasks to for instruction and applying what students are learning. And if we continue on to the next module, you'll see that it follows nearly the same pattern. So again, you have an overview page that introduces the module, a topic preview discussion, an instructional video. And again, the learning objects are repeated. And we do this in order to make the course more accessible. It creates a routine. And by doing so, it helps learners to anticipate and prepare. It minimizes distraction. And all of that really helps the learner to understand how they need to operate in the course. They understand sort of the logistics of learning and gives them space to then be really challenged in the tasks. So it allows us to create tasks that are demanding and rigorous and welcome interest through varied content in those tasks, because the routine has already been established. Learners know what to expect in each module. So it's really the content itself that engages them. And after all that talking, I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa for our next course example.
Great. So staying within the same principle of multiple means of engagement, we'll now look at the dimension of sustaining effort and persistence. So in this dimension, the idea is to build in reminders of objectives throughout the course. And that could mean also dividing the course objectives into smaller modular objectives. And it's also important to display the objectives in multiple ways. So this could be as a bulleted list, or it could be in a paragraph form. And then it's also important to post objectives and schedules in obvious places, because again, we want students not to be cognitively challenged by how the course is set up, for example. And we want to also offer them prompts and scaffolds, for example, models, to help students see the desired outcome. And all of this is with the purpose of sustaining effort and guiding students in appropriate goal setting, which is actually also part of the multiple means of action and expression in the dimension of strategy development, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So let's take a look at an example from one of our other courses. So we'll start with the welcome module. And you can see here that we have in the welcome module a list of our course objectives. So students can easily access that there, or also you can see there's a link to the syllabus, so they can also access it there. And then if we take a look at the module overview page, for example, of the first module in this course, you can see we have both the narrative form that explains kind of what they'll be doing or trying to achieve in this course, as well as the module objectives. So we've taken these module objectives, they're related to the course objectives. And then finally, if we look at the final application task in this module, you can see here we again have a paragraph that narrates what students have actually achieved related to the course, related to the module objectives. So students are seeing the objectives in multiple ways throughout the course. So now I'll turn it back over to Kate for the next dimension.
All right, moving on to the next dimension, we have in the area of designing multiple means for representation within the providing options for perception. Here we have guidelines about making information accessible through color, text size and font, image size, layout, contrast between background and text image. So, all the ways that you're formatting your content online, making sure that it's accessible. And if you are not new to accessibility, you've probably heard some of these ideas before. You really want to use accessible colors, fonts, layouts, and so on. Um, you also want to make sure the rate of speech is accessible. So it's not at a pace that students aren't able to follow the information. You want to provide text equivalents. So if you have audio or visual or videos, you want to provide captioning and transcripts. I at least one is best. Really, ideally, if you can have both, if we have the capacity to do so, we try to provide our learners with both captions and transcripts. And then you also can provide information in different ways, such as using some visual graphics and diagrams, infographics, for example, and that for any images or graphics, you're providing alt text for this information as well. And we can see that in our next example here. In this course, we have included an infographic that provides some information to our learners in this multimedia format. So you can see we have, it happens to be on the topic of best practices for staying safe online. And for each of our best practices, we have included text as well as a graphic. And then below the infographic itself, we have an alt text description. Being that this is a longer format than just an image, it's a full infographic. We do have this separate alt text in a paragraph form that fully describes what's going on in the infographic. And with that, I will pass it back to Alyssa for our next example.
Okay, so staying within the multiple means of representation, we'll look at the dimension of building knowledge. And this is the idea that we want to activate or supply background knowledge through doing different things. For example, providing topic preview discussions at the beginning of the modules, giving students pre-reading or pre-watching reflection questions, and then also linking to previous tasks with related knowledge and skills so that students can quickly find the previous task that could help them complete the new task. And all of this is to help students to internalize and use the new knowledge. So we'll take a look at another example, and we'll start with the preview discussion. So in this English for Economics course, the preview discussion is asking students to reflect on how they study their economics textbook. And that is actually also the focus of the module. And so the reflection questions, again, you can see here, ask them to do that, and they'll post their answers and reply to each other. And if we take a look now at the video in this module, activate student schemata so that they're more engaged with the video. And then finally, if we look at the final enrichment task, we can see here, if you look at number 2, we can see that there's a link to the skill focused video as well as the skill focused reading. So students can go to those learning objects, to the reading, to the video, and take the knowledge that they have there and use that to complete the final task. All right, so now I'll turn it back over to Kate.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to our next example is in the same area of uh, designing multiple means for representation within the dimension of building knowledge. And here we have the idea of guiding information processing and visualization by dividing long videos and readings into smaller parts and providing clear prompts and steps for assignments. And doing this allows students to easily understand and apply information. And so, looking at our course example here, we're going to look at a few different pieces. Um, so here it's a pretty simple idea is that we've taken a longer video and we've made it into 2 parts. And so you can see in the title itself, this is part 1. And then if you move on to the next page, you have the second part of the video. And that just makes sure that each video is, maybe 4 minutes or no more than 5 minutes long to really keep it into a small amount of information at one time. And then pretty much the same idea is shown in this course in the reading in this module. I'm sorry for this long scroll. I'm almost done. There we go. So in this same module, after this part 1 and part 2 of a video, we have part 1 and part 2 of a reading. Same idea here. It's taken a longer amount of content and chunked it into 2 parts to make it more manageable for the learner. And then the third idea I wanted to show is that for assignments that we have provided clear prompts and steps that help learners to complete tasks. And in this case, we have an application task and we have given learners a template. They have options of opening it as a Word file or a PDF. And if you look at the template, it takes the task and breaks it down into steps and specific instructions in each of those in order to complete the task. And so this particular assignment is rather challenging for our learners, but we've supported them by giving them this template that really breaks it down and gives them simple steps to kind of to get it done and apply what they've learned in the module. And with that, I'll turn it back to Alyssa for, I believe, our last example.
Thanks, Kate. So we'll now look at the multiple means of action and expression. We're going to focus on the dimension of strategy development. And I already mentioned this with the previous slide, but this is the idea that we want to enhance our students' capacity to monitor their own practice. And we can do that by providing, for example, self-assessment rubrics, self-assessment checklists, and even questions that help to guide students in monitoring themselves and to reflect. And all of this, again, is with the purpose of helping students to guide their own effort and practice and really achieve learner autonomy. So let's take a look at a course example, and we'll start with the module final enrichment task. And you can see in this final enrichment task, if we open the PDF, and we're gonna have to scroll down to, I think, the third page. We can see here a checklist, and this checklist is for students to use after they've analyzed their primary sources. They're supposed to use this checklist to see if they've actually completed the steps that will help them to, accurately analyze a primary source. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing is that we can take a look at the module wrap-up reflection. And in this reflection, we're providing guiding questions for students to really reflect on their progress. So we're asking them, for example, here to say how confident they feel about the skills and strategies they've learned. And if they are not feeling so confident, then they can write down some questions. And then we also ask students to set a goal and to also create steps to help them to achieve that goal. So again, all of this is with the purpose of helping students to monitor and to reflect. And we'll move on to the next slide. And now that we've actually finished our presentation, we wanted to leave you with some reflection questions. So the first reflection question is asking you to think back to the challenges we've discussed, and which of the UDL guidelines and/or design examples that we've showed you would you like to incorporate in your courses? And then the second question is, how would you incorporate these guidelines and/or examples, and think about the steps that you would need to take, resources you would need, and much more. So we thank you for listening to our presentation. Please do not hesitate to contact us. Here are our emails: caitlin.decker@asu.edu and anostas@asu.edu. Thank you again, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.